Forget frequently asked questions.
Common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Before we begin, a note from our sponsor. I'm Richard Jacobs, Executive Director of the nonprofit Finding Genius Foundation and host of the Finding Genius Podcast. In late 2016, I was rear-ended at 65 miles an hour by a truck on the highway, which sent me off-road into a ditch. The impact of the collision gave me a concussion and other injuries. At the hospital, a CT scan showed that I had thyroid nodules, which turned out to be cancer. It was then, when I had a biopsy of my neck, that I realized even if I was a millionaire, I wouldn't want a second or a third biopsy due to the pain and the invasiveness of it. And appointments at that time for thyroid experts were 3 to 6 months out. And I was worried about dying now, even if that was irrational. So because of this, I've decided to raise money to conduct a literature review on steroids, on the causes of anxiety and depression, a condition that affects well over 50 million people in the United States and hundreds of millions worldwide. Our goal is to create a codex, a guide that reveals all possible treatments for anxiety and depression for people that live with the condition, or for loved ones that have it, as my wife and my son do. To find out more about our fundraiser, visit findinggeniusfoundation.org and click on current initiatives. And now to our guest.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius Podcast, now part of the Finding Genius Foundation. Quick note about the foundation. We started on our project to look for every possible treatment for anxiety, depression, and PTSD. The goal is to create a low or no cost resource for sufferers where they'll do a quiz, which will identify possible treatments that may be suitable for them. And then it's up to them to, look at the condensed information and take action and call a practitioner. So if you have interest in this project, we need donations, we need help, etc. Go to findinggeniusfoundation.org. And today my guest is Nick Bracks. He's an actor and an advocate changing the face of mental health. He's the author of Move Your Mind, How to Build a Healthy Mindset for Life. His website is nickbracks.com. So it's NICKBRACKS.com. Nick, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Tell me a bit about your background. How did you get into Mindset for Life and all the stuff that you do right now? What's your history?
Yeah, I've been involved in it for over 10 years now, and it came about organically. I didn't actually plan to go into that field, and not from a psychology background, but as far back as I can remember growing up, I had issues with OCD and anxiety and overthinking, and it sort of manifested when I was finishing up at high school. I wanted to be a professional athlete, and my body had fallen apart, and I was obsessing about it. It had become an addiction, sort of as an 11-year-old training, 7 hours a day, just, crazy sort of levels, and didn't develop socially, and grew up in a famous family on top of that. So I had identity issues around trying to prove myself and being in the shadow of my father, and sort of discovered alcohol after I finished school and went on a spiral, and it's a long story, but wound up in, a number of life-threatening incidents. And eventually when I was coming through it, I was on different television shows and had developed a bit of a media personality in Australia and had the chance to talk about it. And that's really when I found the passion for communicating and sharing stories, and saw how huge of an impact it had by going and doing that. And yeah, like I said, for the last 10, probably longer, 11 or 12 years, I've been speaking in schools and organizations and producing content, and just using communication and storytelling to get these messages out there. And it's something that I'll do for the rest of my life, like having this conversation now. I think it's really important that we all do as much of that as possible, because it really does make a difference.
What got you out of the mode you were in? It sounds like you were partying a lot. How did you know when it was serious? How did you know that it's time to work on yourself, to pull yourself out of what you were in?
I think deep down for a long time I knew, because it wasn't, just normal partying. It was really, deep depression, anxiety, social isolation. I had no self-esteem. I had no hope for the future. I didn't even want to have a future at that point. I couldn't get out of bed. So it was that went on for such a long time, and got to the point where I had lost hope and just didn't even want to have a future anymore. And my luckily, I've got an amazing family and I was trying to hide it from them, but my mum had to intervene and literally drag me to see a psychologist, which I sort of accepted at that point because I just thought, well, I've got to try anything here because I was just in such a hole and thought I wouldn't get out of it. And that sparked sort of a very slow and gradual change that, took me on the path I was. But it was really, it sparked from being in such a hole for such a long time and really desperately needing to make that change.
So what were some of the things you tried to help yourself? What worked and what didn't?
So much trial and error. I saw a number of psychologists over the years. Some of that helped. It definitely didn't completely help. I think it's really important to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist or professionals, and it plays a part. But again, part of the reason I talk about this stuff is, it's such a complicated area and that's only one part of it. So for me, it was a very gradual learning of, okay, this works to a degree, but I need more I need to be able to empower myself on a daily basis and find things that I can actually do to stop myself from ruminating and having all of these anxious thoughts and going down these rabbit holes. And what I come from a competitive sporting background, and exercise was the biggest one, just getting back into training every day. And to this day, that's the biggest one for me. I train every day and in some capacity, and that just clears my head. And I think it's the best, therapy for me. And then the other things were meditation, and having a really strong support group around me, having people that I can talk to, 24/7, friends that, I support and they support me, and having those unconditional relationships.
So how have you decided to make an impact beyond yourself, in the various communities of people that suffer? One way is through the book. Just let the listeners know what kinds of things you're doing.
Of course. So basically it started out with the speaking, and that led to me organically, not meaning to make a career out of it. I actually was just doing these talks for free and kept getting asked back, eventually started getting paid to do it and got represented by different agencies. And then I got trained as a facilitator in different companies. And that led to me building my own training company where I work with a number of psychologists and experts and build programs, and I and a number of other people facilitate them. It's all through the brand Move Your Mind. And then that's evolved into building audio and video programs and learning tools that we license into schools and companies, and now other sort of areas like the Move Your Mind podcast and the Move Your Mind book that I've just released recently. And in the US, I'm from Australia and I'm living in the US at the moment. And the next project we're working on is actually making a docu-series around mental health that we're hoping to get out next year. So it's all around creating sort of readily available mainstream sort of learning tools that we can get as far and wide as we can.
Yeah, you're doing a lot. So is the predominant remedy or treatment you found is physical activity? Is it physical activity alone or with friends, or like have you centered in on one thing, or is it really a multitude and it depends on what's going on with the person affected?
Yeah, so it's a good question, but no, what I center in on is not any one particular thing in terms of what you should or shouldn't do. The thing that I'm really centered on is telling stories and using, people to communicate that, whether it's myself, whether it's interviewing, like on the podcast, a celebrity, or through this TV show, whether it's producing the book, whether it's producing those programs that we can feature a very broad range of experts. So really what we're trying to do is show people, hey, here's how you can understand in a simplistic and broad level the full spectrum of mental health, and try and start to understand yourself and know, from everything, like I was saying before, from where to go to see a psychologist to then, how can I actually start showing more vulnerability and talking about my own story? How can I start to question some of my thinking patterns? What are some things I could do? Exercise, definitely one of them. And, on a personal level, what I believe in, obviously wholeheartedly, and, then things like meditation, gratitude journaling, checking in with people, so it's really, to simplify, like I said before, around how can we communicate these messages on as wide of a level as we can. And I don't believe in saying that there is one right or wrong way, because I believe every single person's different, responds differently. What works for me may not work for someone else. And I think that's a really important thing, that we're taught that. And then I think the other part is there's a huge amount of amazing reactive services out there, but there's not enough preventative services. And it's because we're not taught about this in schooling. We're not taught through our parents often. So we need to be more preventative. The same way that we exercise and eat well because we want to look after our long-term health, we need to learn from an early age, what are all the things that, around mental health that I can do for myself, not just because I'm struggling or depressed or anxious or having a bad day, but do every day because I want to better myself and I want to have better quality of life and I want to be, mindset. I want to have the right tools available for when things do go bad.
Before we continue, I've been personally funding the Finding Genius podcast for 4.5 years now, which has led to 2,700 plus interviews of clinicians, researchers, scientists, CEOs, and other amazing people who are working to advance science and improve our lives and our world. Even though this podcast gets 100,000 plus downloads a month, we need your help to reach hundreds of thousands more worldwide. Please visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click on Support Us. We have 3 levels of membership from $10 to $49 a month, including perks such as the ability to see ahead in our interview calendar and ask questions of upcoming guests, transcripts of podcasts you're interested in, the ability to request specific topics or guests, and more. Visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click Support Us today. Now, back to the show.
Do you directly counsel anyone, or is it, again, one-to-many through your book and through your website and all that? Do you do individual coaching? How are you interacting with other people that have these issues?
One-to-many. So I work with, like I was saying, people who do that kind of counseling and psychologists and people that do work one-on-one. I'm not, I'm first and foremost an advocate and a facilitator and a communicator. I don't think of myself as a coach because I believe there's highly qualified people that can do that. So again, my job I see is to bring those people together and use my voice and platforms to communicate those messages. So that's what I'm trying to do anyway.
So what are some of the avatars or archetypes of people that suffer from anxiety and depression that you've observed? Are there, I know there's, in general, are there certain types or personality types or situations that correlate with depression, anxiety, PTSD? And, what do you see? What are some of the major ones?
I mean, it's a hard question to answer because anxiety especially is something that's affects people all over the world more than ever. We live in a crazy world now, and obviously with what's happened with COVID, but even before that, just with the way the world's structured, especially, being in America, it's another extreme from Australia and other countries where, it's built on capitalism and, what's next and consumerism and, what's happening with social media and everything we're exposed to. It's causing unprecedented levels of anxiety. So I think if you ask the question about anxiety, that's just across the board affecting people. And it's a dramatic problem. This is something that needs urgent addressing and nowhere near enough's being done about it. And the message around that is probably in the short term, not enough will be done. So it's up to the individual to empower themselves. How do they do that? Well, they need to be educated. How do we educate them? Well, what I'm doing is only going to reach, as far as I have the capacity to reach. So we need bigger, people with more resource than me and governments doing that. But in terms of the other areas, if you're saying in general, who are the people that are suffering from mental health related conditions and anxiety and things like that, it would be people that, either don't have the self-awareness or haven't had the education around it, people that have, a chemical imbalance that haven't, spoken up about it. I can't tell you how many people I've come across through the public speaking I've done in organizations that have, after 20 years, after hearing talk, and not that I did anything unique, but just after feeling like they got given permission to talk about it, they went and reached out and got help for the first time because they either weren't aware of it or felt like that it, you're meant to just push through. So it's a broad thing. I mean, the stats show that this mental health is affecting more people than ever.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
I know it's broad, but what commonalities do you see? If someone is predominantly anxious versus depressed versus stressed out of their mind or hypervigilant, what are some of, again, the avatars that you see generally? Well,
overthinking, rumination, putting pressure on yourself, not having enough self-love. I think the biggest one is tying your identity to external factors. So I think, and again, that's what we're taught, people trying to look for validating themselves through all these different external things. So personality type people that are obviously more high functioning, that, think a lot. If you don't have the right tools, that's definitely going to lead to anxiety. And the people that are high achievers often have far, greater anxiety and are more likely to become depressed, because if your mind's thinking that much and you don't have the tools to look after it, it's going to lead to problems. So I think that's a big one.
So what kind of tools are given in your book and in your consulting? I know, again, it depends on the situation, but what are some of the examples or tools or suggestions that you have for people when they're dealing with these problems?
Well, I mean, I'll go into the book. So the book's, I guess, broken into, 4 key areas. It's sort of a combination of, we've got stories, my own story, and stories from different people throughout the book, from celebrities to grassroots stories to wellness experts. And the core of it's broken into 4 key areas. So it's around move your mind, which is all fitness, exercise, movement, still your mind, which is around connection, sleep, that area. We've got connect your mind, and all of these areas come with different experts. So for the fitness area, we've got different experts that we've interviewed. They're talking about the science behind it. They're talking about practical things you can do. And then it's broken into, okay, here are, whether you're starting from a intermediate level, here are some actual programs you could do if you had, literally only 5 minutes a day at home to do it. Here's what you could do. And if you're at an advanced level, here's what you can do. Here's how you can understand exercise. So really simple stuff, but breaking it down, condensing information into, here's the science behind it, here's how you can understand it, and here's small ways you can try and integrate it into your routine, regardless of what your schedule is. But really, a thing we have a big emphasis on is habit formation. So we've got a big part of the book and the programs on habits, and teaching people how to create habits and having guides through doing that, and using that to apply to whatever it is you're trying to change. Because if you don't make it into that regular sort of habit, it's unlikely to give you the long-term benefit.
What do you see has changed, since the beginning of last year with the virus situation? How have people been affected?
How have they been affected with mental health? Well, I mean,
right,
people...
From your point of view, from what you see, yes.
Oh, well, I mean, people have really struggled because, a lot of vices got taken away. People are having to work from home. I think the biggest one is the lack of certainty. I think most, and I think a lot of people haven't dealt with that degree of uncertainty, and that's caused huge mental health issues. Not having, regular social interactions, not having the, all of the different things that are normally available to us has caused a lot of issues. And I guess that's probably the biggest part of it. I think it's just, it's an unprecedented thing. And I think people, again, because a lot of people haven't been taught the right coping mechanisms and tools to put in place when an event like this happened, they didn't know how to cope with it. So again, I think it highlighted that we need, more preventative solutions available to people. And it really brought that to the surface.
Is there any new avenues in terms of therapy? Are there any therapies that are geared towards people that, are trying to re-enter society? I've heard that there are therapies on helping people specifically deal with, the past 20 months.
Are there specific therapies on that, are you asking?
Yeah, have you tailored your approach and your messaging? And are you seeing from maybe psychologists or other mental health professionals that you interact with a change of approach to help people specifically deal with what's been going on?
No, 100%. Yeah. People are, I have, and I think everyone in that realm has, because it's such an elevated issue at the moment. So it's been something that has had to adapt. And a lot of it is around, dealing with uncertainty, creating those different behavior changes to deal with this new world that we live in. And how can we deal with, PTSD has been something that a lot of people have suffered as well. Definitely seen a change. And on a positive level as well, the change that's been great has been, from a obviously horrible circumstance, but because mental health has become so prevalent through this, more people are talking about it. So it's made it more acceptable to actually talk about mental health and to be more vulnerable. And, that's not seen as taboo on a, broad level now, which is, a great step forward.
What do you see as the future of mental health in short term, over the next 2 years or over the next year? Where do you see it going?
Over the next couple of years, I see things on one end of the spectrum improving in a major way. I think, like I was saying, there's more awareness about it now, where more people are talking about it, more people are wanting to do, to make change in it. Governments can't ignore it anymore. Organizations can't ignore it. Every large organization has some sort of mental health program. And I think there will be more preventative solutions coming out, and, more technologies and innovation and a whole range of things. So I think that's really good. I also, on the other end of the spectrum, see, a continuation of some really incredibly negative things, mainly stemmed around social media and and, and mass media consumption. I mean, there's a million different news outlets now, and we're connected 24/7, and people are consuming, it's hard to decipher what's real and what's not, and go down those rabbit holes. So I think that until, that's addressed, or like I was saying before, unless people can learn to interact with, because it's still, relatively speaking, all of that in social media is still really new. So we haven't really been able to find that sort of, it's still a sort of unknown thing about the long-term ways of interacting and what it's going to do to people. But I think until that's really managed in a better way, there's going to be huge issues coming out of it.
Well, very good, Nick. What's the best way for people to get help from your works, your resources? Like, they can go for your book. If you wouldn't mind, just restate the title and then your website as well. I want to make sure I can point people towards you so that they can get help.
Yeah, I appreciate that, mate. Thank you. So the best way is to go to my website, which is nickbracks.com. If you go there, the book pops up front and center. You can get the book through Amazon. You can get it on Amazon globally. And we've also got we've got a free resource goes with the book if you go to nickbracks.com/moveyourmind. We've got a free toolkit that you can use with the book, and it's got a whole range of areas, so you can download that. And then I've also got some of my programs on there. So on the front page of my website, there's a courses area where we have video learning courses and tools like that as well. And then there's a whole lot of free content, whether you want to learn, listen to the Move Your Mind podcast. We have a weekly podcast where we interview different experts and celebrities and a whole range of people, and then other videos that we create. So yeah, the easiest way, in short, sorry, I'm rambling there, but the easiest way is just to go to nickbracks.com.
Yeah, no, that's great. You've got a lot of resources, people, book, podcast, possible consultation with you. So, Nick, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
No problem, mate. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.